Welcome to The Hype Within, exploring journeys of authentic leadership and growth. On the show, tech leaders will share their stories of developing their leadership skills and challenges they faced along the way. You'll learn about their approaches to self-reflection and personal growth, and how they've been able to build a foundation of authenticity that has propelled them to success. I'm your host, Hana Jacover, B2B marketing leader turned leadership and executive coach. Are you ready to get hyped up? Let's dive in. Hello, leaders. Welcome back to The Hype Within. And today I'm here with a very special guest, somebody I've known for quite a while, and that is Crissy Saunders, who is the CEO and co-founder of CS2. And maybe, Crissy, in a little bit, you can tell us what CS2 is. Hopefully, like, everybody should know who Crissy is and CS2. At least that's what I think. But yeah, Crissy and I have known each other for a while. We were co-board members for Women in Revenue, and that's really where we first met and got introduced. And yeah, she's a wealth of knowledge, and I know she's going to have a lot of great things to share, particularly from the agency perspective, which I think will be interesting to hear about. And we have some shared, or at least I've shared background with you, agency backgrounds, and there's lots of weird angles, interesting angles, particularly on the leadership side. So anyways, I will stop talking. Without further ado, hello, how are you?
I'm good, Hana. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to finally be on the podcast. I know I was like, once I saw it launched, I'm like, I want to be on that. Although it is very intimidating as a leader to then talk about leadership or talk about, what's behind the curtain. But I'm a very transparent person, probably, and so I'm not afraid to talk about things. So, hit me with all the questions. I'm down for it.
I love it. That's why you're here. And it can be scary, but that's just that leaning into vulnerability, which, I think being on a podcast that talks about leadership is showcasing leadership skills and really leaning into being vulnerable and being transparent, like you said. So there you go. Totally. Well, can you give us a little bit of an intro and tell us about your journey and what inspired you to create CS2?
Yeah, of course. So CS2, for everyone who's listening and don't know who we are, and it's okay if you don't, it's very, very niche in the B2B tech world. We're an agency that supports B2B SaaS companies with their revenue growth architecture. So mainly focused on revenue ops and marketing ops. So we're a 15-person team, so a bit on the smaller side agency. We've advised over 100 companies now with their revenue growth architecture, and we get to see what's working and not working and constantly help our clients move forward and build an efficient revenue system. And yeah, we've worked with a bunch of really amazing names in our space and very lucky for that. We started about 8.5 years ago. And I guess that's kind of the interesting thing about my leadership journey is when we first started CS2, which stands for Charlie Saunders and Crissy Saunders. So my husband is my co-founder, which is very unique. And I was quite young. I just got off of 3 startups and leading marketing operations, revenue operations, also demand gen. I think my role right before that, I covered pretty much all of demand gen, SDR, as well as revenue operations. I was a bit burnout. I was working like 18-hour days, like crazy amount of hours, but I had just gotten married, and also to Charlie, who lived in England, and we're working on our visa. So we lived apart for about a year, and then he moved out. And before that, I was just really feeling like I wanted something else. I was very much I don't know, and Hana probably has similar stories, but like, I think when I don't like saying type A, but maybe if you're, just very hardworking, and sometimes as a woman, you give, but sometimes that could be taken advantage of. And I just felt like when I wasn't owning my space and I wasn't creating enough boundaries. And at the time, my dad was sick with cancer, and I knew I was going to probably lose him fairly soon. So I wanted something different. I wanted to take back my life and kind of take back something and stupidly thought that entrepreneurship was was the reason for that, but the answer to that. But no, but it really, I think, helped me. So to start, we were a small team for a really long time, and I had a really great network that I tapped into. So from day one, we had like 5 or 6 clients and we're fully booked. And then from then on, built out the team slowly to now 15. We've gone up to like 18 before, and we're slowly creeping back up. And part of those reasons for changes in team, I'll probably talk through them in when I talk through some of the leadership style.
So much to unpack.
Yeah.
Well, the question around like feeling burnt out and wanting to take back your life, do you feel like you have more and I know entrepreneurship is, there's ups and downs, but do you feel like you have received that?
So I think there's also a difference too. There's like, when I was working in-house, there's also some different components to it. There's the environment that you're working in. And for me, I think I was very much like always a high achiever. I found a lot of personal, like my tie between personal success and work success wasn't very clear. I found a lot of my successes in work is what fueled me. I think a lot of the things that I was dealing with in my personal life, I shied away from and invested that into work. So when my dad was sick, I literally, watched him pass away, and I went back to working like an hour later. And like I very much like just was uncomfortable in being uncomfortable, and then instead used work as a way to shy away from some of those things. And it's only until I've gotten older that you reflect back and you're like, oh, wow, I was doing that. Or at the time I was like, my job's overworking me. They're doing all this, but I wasn't creating boundaries. I wasn't doing a lot of the amazing things that you coach your clients to do. It took a long time to actually kind of figure that out. So I knew I had to remove myself from a place where everyone could kind of feed into that. And really this tizzy of like a fast growing startup that was under resourced will really, like, if you're good at a job and you're good at multiple jobs, you will end up with those jobs. Like people will figure that out and try and leverage that. And unless you have the ability to create those boundaries, you're going to be working nonstop. And I did. And I had a moment where, this is getting quite personal as well, but I'm going to be vulnerable. I had a moment where Charlie came out when we were still living apart, and he went up to bed, and I was still working through the night until like 2 a.m. or so forth. And we jumped on the train the next morning, and he's like, is this, what our life is going to be like? I didn't realize this is like what you're doing. And so I think that was a wake up call for me. And I knew, okay, well, maybe we try something else. Maybe if I'm going to work really hard, maybe it'll be for something that we build together, or I can do myself or own some of that. And I really liked problem solving. I loved like the challenge of helping companies. And so I knew consulting could be really good for that. And that's why I went down that route. And I also wanted this is before remote work was, the norm. But I wanted a remote work job, like where I could work from home, because I wanted to be able to like be there for my family or be there for my mom or my dad, but then still have the ability to go into an office when I wanted to see a client. So that really appealed to me. But to say, yeah, I was burned out, but then I had some, even though I needed to build up our base of business and I was still working really long hours sometimes to meet a client deadline, I think it was different because it was like I chose to do that instead of being forced to do it. And that was a little bit different to me, where I found some value. And then I was able to step away when I needed to in the middle of the day. And I just knew I needed that at that time. And now it's a bit different when you do have a team and more of a team. Some of that flexibility actually goes away because you have a lot of other people that are fighting for your time too. But I will say, like, to this day, like, I work hard, but I work smart. I work like a normal work day. And I realize that family's first, and myself, my health is first. And that's what takes up the other part of the day. And I very much feel like that has helped me find that work-life balance that I know doesn't really exist, but it helps me find balance to myself, that where I flex in other parts, I know to flex down. in others and when I need to, and having that intuition to really know when I'm starting to get burnout to step back.
You are describing so many of my clients. Like if anybody out there is wondering who I work with, it is this. It is people like Crissy, and that was me too. I like to think of the idea of work-life sprints
Yeah.
because you're like the balance doesn't exist and it's not even. It's not equal. And sometimes it's more work and sometimes it's more life. And sometimes it's work for a little bit and life for a little bit. And so I just like to think of it as these sprints, but I don't think that you can get to that point until something hits you smack dab in your face and you are
Yeah.
forced to take a step back. And like what I would love to create for people is a space where they can explore this before they get hit in the face. And they can develop the strategies that you're talking about, that these sprints or however it is that you want to work, whatever it is to make you feel like you can control the things that you can control and set those boundaries would be ideal. And yeah, the boundaries, you also explained something that I definitely felt when you're in it and you're burnt out. And there's so many things, there's so many reasons why this happens, but you do want to blame everything else around you. And that's not to say that like there's not a shared responsibility for that,
Totally.
but you don't want to look at what you weren't doing. Like, oh, I was, or I am saying yes to everything. I'm not setting boundaries. I'm not being clear with my expectations. And that's a hard pill to swallow. But yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it takes healing to kind of get through that. And then I feel like once you do, then it's like this ebb and flow,
Yeah.
like, yes, busy, your team's growing, you got to be there for them, but you have flow and you see the ebbs, you see the flows, and it's just a little bit more controlled, I think.
Totally. I think to some time, to your point, there's going to be moments of your life where you're going to be forced to make these decisions, whether it's something health wise with yourself. Let's be honest, like stress and overworking is not good for you. It could be changes in your life. So for me, that first one was like kind of some of the stuff I was going through, but then it really hit me once I became a mom, and I was used to owning my time. I was used to telling people what to do, and I was not prepared for that change in my life. I was very selfish in some ways where I was constantly thinking about, myself and what I could
Mhm.
do. And in some ways, like you said, like that could create certain kinds of relationship with maybe not like having that a good sense of self too. It's weird when you focus so much on yourself, you actually don't even have the ability to see like how you were acting certain ways. You can make a lot of excuses for yourself. So
Mhm.
anyway, I think becoming a mom was that hit for me. I had a very challenging postpartum experience, and I had to return back to work, after like 8 weeks. When you're running your own business and you're being paid off billable time, you don't have mat leave. It just
Yeah.
doesn't happen. And so you're like, okay, I need to get back to work, and I need also then pay for someone to watch my kid while I work. And
Mhm.
when you have two people running a business. So that was a big shock for me, I would say. And I was forced to do a lot of self work at that time. I had never done before, but you realize there's things about your personality too, your value system that made you make those decisions. So I very much valued efficiency, productivity, perfectionism. Yeah, just all of that. And so you're very much risk for burnout. Yeah.
Yeah, but it helps you see the patterns when you
Yes.
do that work, even the pattern of seeing, how you handled your father's death, right? And
Hmm.
going right back to work. Like that was probably a pattern. It was probably just like an extreme. And there were probably so many other times where you could point that out and then like figuring out where it came from so you can deconstruct that
It
and
totally.
rewrite and rewire, which is hard work. But I'm happy for you that you were able to go through that and heal and just like do that work. It's hard. It's hard, and a lot of people don't want to do it because, as you said earlier, a lot of people are not comfortable with being uncomfortable, and a lot of people find it uncomfortable to go within and just sit with their thoughts and try to figure out who they are and what makes up all of that.
Yeah. But I think when you do, I've actually been able to be a better leader, a better mom. It wasn't actually until I saw it. I got pregnant again recently and I took a big step back and I did some more work with someone on internal family systems, which if people don't know
Ooh.
that, it's a very good framework, I think, for understanding the whole self and the parts of you and not getting rid of those parts, but really like understanding them and embracing them. And I highly recommend that for some people who maybe have those traits and you have certain traits that are part of what you maybe developed when you were young. And it's going back and really understanding those traits, those patterns that you have. And instead of blaming them, really looking at them with compassion and vulnerability and just awareness, and then that helps you realize how you made decisions and you can actually see parts of yourself probably in other people too. So I highly recommend that. But it's we're talking about leadership today, and I would say that's been the biggest thing for me, to be a leader, not only in my job but in my house and as a friend and so forth.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, so beautiful. My heart is so happy for you and all of like knowing what you've gone through and just all of the setbacks to see CS2 as the successful agency and you at the helm of it with Charlie. I love when you show up on my LinkedIn. I love whenever I see anything with your face, I'm like, yes, she's doing it. How would you define your leadership style?
So I think my leadership style, I mean, it'd be interesting to ask people my leadership style, but I think when I think about how I develop my leadership style is kind of like parenting too. So, like, I think when you become a parent, in some ways, you start out thinking, well, I'm not going to do this that like my parents did. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to be different, you know? And in some ways, I started out my leadership path that way. And I think that worked out really well for me because I think I took a lot of some of the leadership that I had in the past with certain bosses, and some had great things, but there were definitely some things from a C level, not even my boss, like actually mainly from an executive level that I saw. And I was like, well, I know I don't want that. And I want to
Mhm.
build an environment that's different. So we have some values at CS2, but I definitely think leading with transparency is the number one thing. There's very often that like I would find out I was getting a new boss, like literally minutes before the whole company found out, or I wasn't really sure what the goals of the business were, or wasn't really shared how are the financials and things like that. And so I really think that being transparent with your team and your company and really being in some ways vulnerable too, because you have to share everything that within reason that's like going on. And I feel like I benefit from having a small team, but I would say leaders with, if you look at the way I look at my whole company, you can even look at your whole team this way. So you don't have to be a CEO to share what are the goals, like what's actually
Mhm.
happening from like a financial level, revenue level, what are some of the things that you're really, struggling with but trying to improve. All of that I think is really, it's important to share without having to have your employees make guesses about it and then
Mhm.
be blinded when they find out. Oh, I think a lot of people recently in tech have had those experiences. They're like, wait, I thought I was on this fast growing unicorn rocket ship and
Mhm.
I got laid off, because everyone flipped back the curtain, they were really going above their skis. And just that's kind of never been my thing. I've kind of always been a bit more on the conservative side with growth and just not growing for growth's sake, which can be hard with an agency to not want to do that. And I've seen other agency leaders step back and say, like, oh, hey, like, you were right. Like, that's not good to do, And so I've had some moments where I felt like I had imposter syndrome. Oh, I'm not growing my agency as fast or as many people as we can. but instead I try
Mhm.
to focus on the value that we're delivering clients. And so I think I tend to be a bit more conservative that way, just knowing that I want to maintain a good environment for employees so they can just come in, do a really good job, learning, just constantly learning. And then also just feel fulfilled, like the people they're working with, the work that they're doing, and then learn. And that's the environment that I've always tried to deliver, as well as Charlie. We always kind of work toward that.
Yeah, and it sounds like quality over quantity
Yeah.
too is important.
Yeah, I've
Which
always
I
always thought that with the agency, like I want to be known as the best and not the biggest.
Yes, yeah, I've experienced agency life on both sides, and, I wouldn't even say, like, big, but bigger than
Yeah.
an 18-person team, like a
Mhm.
50-person team, which is pretty big for an agency, especially in
It is.
B2B.
Yeah.
And you get lost, and there's a lack of transparency. There's so much hierarchy, which I'm autistic, so I hate that. I actually don't, I just ignore it. In fact, like I would just like go straight to whoever I needed to, and that
Oh
people don't
yeah,
like that.
I would do that too. Does that? I mean,
And
I'm
you're like, oh,
questioning
wait a
myself
second.
now.
It's just one characteristic out of many. But yeah, I mean, like that makes a big difference, and thinking about the quality, and even just thinking about like what we produced in a smaller agency versus a larger agency, like you can tell the difference. You can tell the
Yeah.
difference in the relationship. You can
Mhm.
tell the difference in the actual work. You can tell the difference in how people are collaborating. I would sit on calls and there would be just fights, arguing, and I was baffled by this coming from
Mm.
such a small team. We would never allow this. It was definitely conflict, but it wasn't healthy conflict.
Right.
We would not have allowed that unhealthy type of conflict to happen in a smaller agency. Anyways, so I'm hearing like transparency, vulnerability, and all of that you've taken from your own journey and really made those the core values of the agency. Are there any others that stick out in terms of values, or even just like how you've thought about culture?
Yeah, like some of our other values come down to like accountability. So I think for us at CS2, we don't want anyone to feel like they're kind of like picking up the slack for others, but also just there's accountability to the team because we're all working together to
Mhm.
meet deadlines. And also there's accountability to the client. And so there's part of that. I think there's also kind of this we always just strive to be better, and not in a way where it's like constantly just thinking about the lack of skills that we have, but just thinking about how can I just improve ourselves. Like and that's not like, oh, the most junior people need to improve themselves. It's everyone. It's everyone. How
Mhm.
can we improve what we're doing? How can I constantly improve the systems that our team is doing? And so I think when you do that at a high level, your team will kind of feed off of that and they'll continue to want to do that. And then I would say that collaboration is another thing. So I very much value our team does a great job of this. Like everyone supports each other. We have on Slack, like we have a questions for the team channel, and it's literally so people can just help each other. And it's amazing to see each other. Like it's not even the task that they're assigned to do. They'll jump on a call and help someone if they need it. They'll answer their question. They'll work to, if they're really stuck on something to help them fix it. And so I love seeing that. And I think that probably is a strong part of our environment that probably I value too. So I think it's just healthy that people do that. And then also kind of this like level of trying to improve is like really thinking about the biggest problems and how we can tackle them the best way. So we constantly focus on skills. We do skills assessments across the team. We support certifications. We have our own internal training. And then we have like our weekly, we call it caffeine and brains. But we meet as a team to go through a bunch of like questions that the team have and talk them through and just learn from each other. And sometimes that means sharing things
Mhm.
that we built and sharing things that we learned. And we do a lot of praise as well across the team, not from a top just down, but to each other. We have a system called like Hey Taco where they can give tacos in Slack to someone
Mhm.
and they can use that for kind of prizes and things. But everyone does it like not because they feel like they have to, they just want to. They want to like give kudos to the other team members that help them. And I just love seeing that. It's
Mhm.
amazing.
Yeah, it sounds like you've taken all of those core values that you have discovered for yourself, transfer them into your leadership, transfer them into this awesome culture that you have now. And that really enables the team to live by those values, but also like agency life. It's so important that you're creating moments where you can transfer that value and those experiences to your clients, which it sounds like you're also doing with all of the things you have in place.
Yeah, and I think sometimes one of the hardest lesson that I've had recently is sometimes the environment that you're building isn't right for everyone. And
Mhm.
so like I've had someone say that our environment was toxic positivity and that's just
Yeah.
I'm like, actually, I don't know. This thing is just a positive environment, and that person I think was just dealing with something, and probably I kind of had a conversation of like maybe it's not the right environment now for you at this point in your life, and I could totally see that. And then also, you could be amazing at your job, but if you're not willing to kind of step up and be accountable and reliable and work with the team, it's also not a good fit. But it's being
Mhm.
okay saying like, "Hey, there's just not a good fit here." Or if you're gonna like not have intrinsic motivation, sometimes an agency can be tough if you don't have that. If you're
Yeah.
constantly, I prefer a team having autonomy, being, left to use their own motivation, inspiring the team, motivating them. But when it comes down to it, we're all adults and we can't just be persuaded, guilted, yelled at, all those things that you're talking about to get people to produce action. I prefer that to come from a place that is a bit more natural. And so that's been the lesson for me is that not everyone has that kind of intrinsic motivation. So it's figuring out how do you
Mhm.
create some motivation or realize, okay, it looks like there's probably a different type of style of leadership or environment that would work better for you. And maybe that's not here. And that's okay. I used to take that as I take it personally when someone wasn't successful at our company. And instead, I've had some people come back and actually thank me, like parting ways and things like that. And so, and
Mhm.
just saying how it was still a great opportunity. And as a leader, those are some things that you learn how you could do better, but know that maybe don't let the 1% help like make you second guess what you're doing for the rest of the team that's actually really giving them value.
Yeah, that's a great point. Everybody has their own view of the world and
Yeah.
perception, and that difference where you have your own perception, you recognize everybody has their own perception, but then being able to step back and look at the perspective, having perspective over perception is really a
Mm-hmm.
fascinating concept. And then I also think about adult development. We are all in different stages of our lives.
Yes.
And we do have a different perception and we care about different things. If you are depending on how and people won't like this term, but there's an adult development theory that explains this. And everybody is in a different stage.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are in the stage where they care about these external validations, they care about the external motivations, and they just don't see that interconnectedness of why it's important to be motivated from those intrinsic
Mm-hmm.
reasons and like then how you can have an impact on all these other things, and that's okay. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just seeing that, just seeing that, okay, this person's not here yet and that's totally fine, or here's how I'm going to adapt to meet them where they're at and hopefully help inspire them to develop further in their journey.
Totally. Yeah, I was actually thinking about this morning, and I was like, I was even gonna post something on LinkedIn, but I was like getting my head around it, and I was thinking about like between your 20s and 30s, I think you're very much at this point of, just development, like you said, and your life. A lot of the things are different than you're usually on your own. You maybe don't have children yet. You're not taking care of a parent yet. and you are a bit selfish. And I think you also don't really think about, and I just say selfish is not sometimes a bad thing. It can be a good thing, because what you can do maybe during that time is turn that selfishness and focus on really building up your skill set, doing a lot
Mhm.
of self work on building up your career and things like that. And that can be a great time to do that. But then what you also like don't then end up realizing until you're in it is, past that, there's a lot of other things that life brings you that can, make you realize things need to change, or then you need to move toward focusing, well, how can I be a better employee? How can I balance being a good employee while still showing up for people that need me? And there's just different things that can pull you away from the work, where I think other times it's like nothing can pull you away from work, but then you still feel like you need something to kind of keep you there. And so
Yeah.
there's a difference in those two things. And so I like that you talked about like kind of the stages of the adult, because I really, really agree with that. But it's like, how can you really lean into that time and maybe do things to help keep you motivated and also build your career at the same time?
Mhm. Okay, let's talk about the team a little bit, because I always am fascinated from a leadership perspective. Leadership in agency land is so different than working at a startup or large organizations where, yes, you're serving your customer, but it's different with clients. It's very
Yeah.
different with clients having a service-based team and a service-based model. And so, how do you lead your team in a way where they are inspired to build really strong, effective relationships with their clients, and to the point where like they're aligned with their values, they know their message, they're so in tune with each other?
Yeah. This is a great question. And I was really trying to think through like the best way to talk about this. But one, I will say, like, do a little bit of storytelling. But recently, I've been, well, constantly kind of go back and look at our mission and things like that. And I think to your point, as an agency, one of the most interesting thing is your people are your product. You're not selling a
Mhm.
product. You're not doing it like you are selling a product, but like you're not selling like a product that isn't just your people. So the people selling the product is the product. The people like marketing the product almost is the product. Because a lot of what you're doing in an agency, like if you do good work, you're gonna get more work a lot of the time. And
Yeah.
so it's very interesting in that way. And then when you're working in-house, it's very clear who your boss is, who you're getting orders from, things like that. At an agency, you have this mix of, you have your boss or your leader, and then you also have your client that you're getting requests
Mhm.
from and you're working toward and you're trying to please. And so I said recently, like, always want our team to know that they're working for CS2 and not for the client. Yes, they're working to support the client. Yes, they're working to help them like meet their goals. But when it comes down to it, I always want them to feel like they're working for CS2. And
Mhm.
so that can be a bit tricky, because especially times right now, they're like the companies that we support are under a lot of pressure. It's part of the reason why I like being an agency and maybe not directly in it, is because that can be a bit stressful. Like, to be fair, like work always is stressful, and being an agency supporting them can be stressful. But one of the things is I like being able to put some safeguards so that my team isn't too stressed. Like, in order to do good work, like you can't be too stressed. Some stress is good. It puts you into action. It's actually literally, if you
Mhm.
look up stress, they'll talk about that. But when there's too much of it and there's too much, that leads to anxiety. So underlying stress all the time is anxiety. You probably talk about this with your clients a lot. And what I don't want our team is to be an anxious team. And so I think we try and put some safeguards into that. One, which is really trying to make sure that the clients we do take on board are a good fit. And sometimes that's hard. Like, we're always going to meet new personalities, new people come in, things like that. But
Mhm.
as long as like the work that we're getting is kind of aligned to what our team can do and support, which can be hard, especially in operations, it changes massively what you have to do and what you should be doing. And so but we try and make sure our clients are a good fit. And then also, like I said, we really split out our team so that people's skill sets can be to shine. So we have like a client lead instead of a project manager who's more of a director and works with that client day in, day out. But different
Mhm.
members of the team also have their different skill sets. So you might be building more on the mop side. We have our analytics and SA team that are kind of focused. We have our campaign operations team, and they all can support like one client, but they're all leaning into their strengths, and they have different ways that they're, learning their expertise instead of having to know everything, which can be really hard. And so, but we put a lot of systems in place to make sure all those people are working really well with each other, so there's like a seamless experience. And then we try and teach like to have a lot of empathy for our clients, as much as it can be a little bit stressful sometimes. They're under a lot of stress too. They're under a lot of pressure. And I always say, like, we want to be their reprieve for that day. If like literally that day we were the best call for them, we helped change their mindset. We helped
Mm.
them get something done. That at the end of the day, I think is very fulfilling and valuable. And so I think our team constantly leads with that. We want to please, we want to solve problems, we want to be the best call they had that day. We don't start calls being like, okay, let's just like get through the agenda. No, we say, how's everything going? I always try and say, really get to know your client, build rapport, build a relationship. And a lot of our relationships last for a long time. We have some clients we've worked with, for 8 years, 7 years, and they're still our clients. And so it's nice to have those relationships. And I think that really motivates the team when they can have those relationships with the client too, but still know that where they work is CS2 and this team is the team that
Mhm.
they're on.
Yeah, yeah. You do become an extension of their team, but there's still a line there. And the relationships that you build really enable, I don't know, like the way that you feel in terms of, yeah, I just feel like we're teammates. We work together, we collaborate, like we could be on the same team. We're not technically speaking, but we could be on the same team, and that's
Yeah.
how we view our partnership, which I think is really important.
Totally. Totally. Yeah. We always say that's like a big core part of our messaging is like we're an extension of your team. And a lot of people, if you read
Mhm.
our GT reviews, will say that we truly, really try to understand their pains, their goals, always align our work to their goals, very much try to understand how like the whole company works. If you
Yeah.
don't do that, you don't have the context to really consult them effectively and build the solutions they need. And so, and it's, you're a coach, and so you'll probably relate to this, but like that's one of the best things about consulting is sometimes like yes, you're helping them build solutions, and part of the reason why sometimes I do still do a little bit of client consulting and client work, because in other days you're kind of their therapist. You're like helping them
Mhm.
through like what they're going through. And that's why I like having all like not like just project managers, but a lot of people that used to work in house and then come to work with us, because they can really empathize with the client and
Mhm.
really relate to them and talk to them. And that can be like one of the most fulfilling things about working at an agency or working in consulting, is having those conversations, and it just feels really good.
Yeah, yeah. This might be a hot take, but I believe that agencies that are really grounded in and live their core values, and you see that through culture, are doing true community work, because it is about helping others. It is about being so grounded in who you are as an agency that then you can go and help others around you. I just think about that being true community work. It's not community work where it's like, we have this product for you, come and get it, and it's going to save you. And it's about being so grounded in the way that you work and how you show up that it enables you to help others. And I think that's what a lot of agencies do. Agencies that are doing it right.
Yeah.
We're going to do the mighty mountain, and this is all about overcoming obstacles. Share a leadership story where you have overcame significant challenges, which you've really already done, but maybe there's one that stands out with like a team member or a client that you can showcase. But that's it.
One of the biggest challenges I think for me was when we grew our team, and a lot of that was last year, beginning of last year. So I think we were like a team of 4 or 5, and then we ended up growing to 10, and then we ended up going to like 18. And so those trips between like to like 18 to me were super challenging. I think I didn't realize like what systems needed to be put in place to support that many people. You think, oh, it can't be that much. It's a lot. And so I think also for me, I was going through an interesting time where I was pregnant and I was having a really bad pregnancy. I know I'm talking about things that relate more to moms, but it just happens to be I am a mom. Okay. So, but I was having a really bad pregnancy. I was very sick pretty much a lot of that time. And at the same time, I was building out new team. And part of me is I lost a lot of confidence. I had a lot of like imposter syndrome. But the confidence thing was like, am I ever going to feel confident again? Like, I just am exhausted. I feel like I'm not doing enough. The team doesn't have the systems that they need. And really, that was a big lesson. But what I realized is that I used to really approach everything very bespoke because that was what I thought our clients needed. But instead, we've built a lot. We've actually took our time to say, okay, we do a lot of bespoke work, but really, there's some core things that really provide a lot of value, and we're doing them a lot of the times for our clients. And how can we just figure out how to do those the best way and articulate the best way and get the most value? And that's when we actually formed our revenue growth architecture. We have a big focus now on kind of the core modules of that, which, not to bore anyone, but we also developed a product to track your funnel. That's the best way we can. Ooh, and so a lot of amazing things came out of that. And as a leader, then I also think it made me realize I used to shy away from tough conversations. I think it was because I lacked some of that confidence as a leader. And I've always been too worried to disappoint people. And at the end of the day, I had to realize like disappointments like are going to happen. I had my own disappointments, you know? And so realizing how do you approach those though with the best way you can and not shy away from them. Charlie was always very good at that. It could be because he's a man as well, but he very much could lean into some of those tough conversations. And since then I kind of taught myself to have those tough conversations when I need to do tough things, like unfortunately let people go, that I always just really shied away from. And I think it took having the confidence to do that and know that's just part of the job and not taking it personally. So not beating myself up when I needed to have those situations. A lot of times I would always think about myself. I'd be like, oh, I did something wrong. I did this, I did that. And it's like, well, actually, this is not bad for you. It's actually probably bad for them. Like if they're being let go, you know? So I try and focus on the whole situation. What's the best thing that I can do to support that person? What feedback can I give? What then solutions do I need to then do to make sure I don't get into that situation again? And also just handle those conversations early, you know, with people, giving feedback as much as I can.
I love that. It sounds like a lot of reframing and a lot of looking at things objectively. What advice would you give aspiring leaders or leaders today and maybe fall into that high performer type A category where they're really seeing a lot of themselves in your story?
I would say definitely like doing a lot of self-reflection and figure out like what is like your value system. And value system is just more like what are the things that you really hold like really true to you and like what maybe drives your decision making. So if you work really hard at your job, what are the reasons for that? Is that because you really like your job? Is it because you get fulfillment out of your job? Is it because you want to impress people? Or is it because you want to impress yourself? Is it because you know, you weren't a great student and now you have something that you can actually do well and you want to prove to people that you can do something well, or you don't want to look dumb because maybe your whole life you didn't feel like you were less than. You know, that's a lot of very deep things, but I do think in order for you to lead others well, you have to really have a better, like strong sense of self and have that humility as well to know like where your flaws are, because also when you understand where your flaws are, you know where to better yourself. But also you are able to see how you can find people that maybe have strengths that you don't have. And then when you understand that too, you can understand your whole team is like that. You can understand, okay, my whole team has strengths and weaknesses, and we can get people to work and understand their own strengths and weaknesses so they can better work together. So I definitely think doing that self work can then help you with confidence, help you create boundaries, help you look at things more objectively, and help you not shy away from the things that you should be doing. I think I see a lot of leaders who are even like have employees that they're struggling to figure out how to motivate them. They're struggling to figure out what feedback to give them or even how to give feedback because they're too afraid of what might happen. And I think try and think of like what or I think I see this a lot too, is we don't want to let people down, so we'll take on too much and then we don't deliver. But it's actually the act of not delivering and not telling people where you're struggling is actually going to be worse for you and your career because the perception is actually worse. And so I think really being honest and true, even as like an employee, can be really useful. But as so all around, I think really having the self sense can really build confidence. And you talk about imposter syndrome a lot, but it's normal to have imposter syndrome, especially as a leader, especially as like a young leader, a new leader. But I think when you are able to step back and understand, oh, look at all this, like the work I did to get here, or this is how I can provide value, you have less of that imposter syndrome to get in your way. So yeah, that's I'm still learning too, so, we'll have to do another one of these again when I'll have more lessons learned.
Well, we all are. It's a never-ending journey, but I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a fantastic place to start, and, leading self before you lead others and doing that work, it's hard, but it's so worth it, I promise. And if you don't know, like, where to start, you can come and have a session with me and I'll tell you.
Totally. I think if you're a leader as well, and you aren't like, leaders need like coaches. Leaders need a lot of the time. And especially if you lead by yourself, you don't have like a co-lead to lean on or anything like that. Coaches like Hana can be so useful to you because you having that outside perspective can just be like a game changer. So whether you're looking at therapy, a coach, or anything like that, I highly recommend that if you're in a leadership position. Like if you're not doing it, honestly, you're probably missing out.
Totally agree. I'm biased, but well, thank you so much. I know you got mom stuff to do.
I do. I do a tour in elementary school. So,
Yes, now we're gonna take off our work hats and put on our mom hats. So enjoy your time with your kiddos, and I enjoy our time together. Like, I'm super proud of you. I love watching you soar, and thank you for coming on and being vulnerable and sharing things and just being you, just being authentic, because yeah, you're awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving me the space to do it. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. I hope you walk away with something empowering that you can take into your own leadership journey. Are you a high-performing executive looking to take your career to the next level? Or maybe you're an emerging leader who wants to develop the skills you need to advance in your role and show up authentically. Or maybe you're experiencing burnout and struggling to find a better work-life balance. Whatever your situation is, one-on-one coaching can help you achieve your personal and professional goals. If you're interested in experiencing the power of coaching for yourself, head on over to hypehousecoaching.com/start coaching now, where you can set up a one-on-one leadership and executive coaching intro session for free. Remember, the only hype that really matters is the hype within.